Welcome to 10 More Questions, a podcast lovingly created by the people of Nicework, a company building and activating brands for rebels, dreamers, pioneers, and that people actually care about. There's no secret that people believe you need a strong brand, but what does that actually mean? What does it actually entail? And how can you ensure that your brand both stands out and supports your business at the same time? Well, in this podcast, we explore that relationship. We understand how businesses can use this, and we talk to amazing people who help us do that. And today on the podcast, I have Rich Mulholland. Rich is an amazing speaker. He is an author of multiple books. We're going to talk about his book in a little bit. And he runs a company called Missing Link, which helps people to do just this, to stand out. Welcome to the podcast, Rich.
Thanks so much, Ross. I feel like it's you're doing me a favor by saying that I run Missing Link. I own Missing Link, but it's definitely Sam that runs it.
Yes, but I mean, I think it's interesting to see all your different pieces that have come together to make this thing. You started, I think Missing Link was a large portion of your working career, but now you spend a lot of your time, as a thought leader, speaking, creating, like writing books, sharing thoughts. I think that consumes a lot of your time, and now you've also started a new company exploring how companies can use AI and being a fractional AI piece. So I think this is all the interesting parts of that. I mean, I guess it comes to the topic of today is there a role for personal branding in the world of AI? And I know you've got very strong ideas around what a brand is, let alone a personal brand. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you think a brand is?
Yeah, so I feel like a brand is a place marker we use when we don't know who we're referring to. So like I feel like if somebody says the Standard Bank brand, it's an anathema. Like that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard of. Just say Standard Bank. Right? It's unnecessary because my opinion on Standard Bank is the Standard Bank brand in accordance to me. So a brand is a corner of real estate that other people own about you. Or that you own in somebody else's brain. Sorry. So, your thoughts on Missing Link. If whatever you think about Missing Link is the Missing Link brand to you. So it's your opinion. It's the collective opinions. In fact, it's not even true. It is the individual opinions, because everybody's brand feeling of a company is their truth. So it's not even collective. It's not like more people think that you're nice and some people think you're an asshole. It's a case of to one person, you are an asshole. To another person, you are nice. And so we use the word brand when we need something to discuss at a level that is an abstraction. But everywhere else, we should just use the company name. If I'm talking about my opinions about Google or Yahoo, my opinions about the Google brand and my opinions about Google, in my mind, should never be separate.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, I think it is. I mean, I love that thought that your brand is what people think about you. We say a lot that the job of a brand is to make people care about you. It's to attach importance to the thing that you are doing. And I agree that I think people inside the industry often get caught up in how important the abstractness of the brand is, and they have people who defend brands. I mean, I have a memory of working with the large electricity generator in South Africa, and there was a video where the logo was animating onto screen, and the brand person made us pause the transition and was looking at the blue and was like, that's not the right blue. And it's like an insane thing when you reach that kind of level of obsession over something and not have the same level of obsession about how do people feel about us, how do they perceive us, what messages are they receiving from us. There's almost too much focus on the visual or the color or the things that feel controllable, and not enough on what do people actually think inside their head about us, which is I think much more powerful, much more useful, much more impactful if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I feel like people conflate the terms brand and corporate identity incorrectly. So they'll talk about a new brand relaunch. Oh, here's a new brand relaunch. And they'll show a new corporate identity. Incidentally, I don't think, by the way, that corporate identity relaunches, pardon me, cannot influence the brand. I'm not saying that they're useless. Sometimes you do need to visualize, represent something in a new visual way to maybe change the way that the market perceives it, because that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to evolve market perceptions of the entity. And if something looks visually different to the way it was, then that's a thing. But I remember for years, so Missing Link had a policy that we had no fixed corporate identity. So we've got a logo up there now, but for many, many years, we had no fixed corporate identity whatsoever. And to some degree, we still don't. We just have this as a convenience. And the idea was that every 3 months you visit our website and the branding had completely changed. The visual components had completely changed. The way we present ourselves, even the theme, we would go from medical to, all different things. And so people would sometimes say to me, I don't understand how you're able to exist without a consistent brand. And I would always argue with them, is we have an unbelievably consistent brand. We just don't have a consistent corporate identity. Our brand was the story that we told about us. Our brand was the fact that we did things a bit differently, that we were visually incongruous, all of these elements that we would change the way we fit to the project. And I believe that when they would debate me, I would say, but look how much press my organization's getting and look how little press your organization's getting. Now, for a very, very small little company that has no brand, we seem to be doing a really good job of branding. And it would always stump them a little bit because we were very, very spoken about, but we had zero fixed corporate identity. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a strategy that most people could use. But if you look at companies like Billabong or Quicksilver, they would change their corporate identity, the visual identity of how their logos are presented often, but you still had a clear sense of who they were. And so they certainly had a brand.
So when you were doing that, because, I do believe Missing Link has a strong kind of brand identity, brand feeling. I think even Mulholland has a strong brand identity, brand feeling, whether it's being captured as a single visual or thing is not I think you've deliberately not done that, but right down to the office and the way the workshops are constructed and the human beings you hired and the language you use, like these all felt like, at least from the outside, very intentional decisions, not accidental decisions.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. I think that we have been very intentional about it, although not so much about the people. There's a weird shared DNA that I've always found. But, for example, I'm quite an outspoken atheist. Every single one of the males that work for me in Missing Link, at least, and one of the ones in Too Many Robots, is an evangelical Christian. I'm a punk rock guy. They are literally preaching to people on weekends. So we couldn't be more different in that regard. But for me, if a business is small enough, and that is the caveats I put, if the business is small enough, it still very, very much becomes a realistic, and it has a strong leader with an opinion. It becomes a manifestation, a kind of physical manifestation of that leader's personality made real. So by sheer force of nature, I believe that a lot of the people look and think the way of the company. And we've done a relatively good job of codifying how we behave when we behave at our best. So we don't say these are the behaviors we expect you must do. We simply had a reflective look and we said, when we were caught doing our best work, or when we were caught showing up the best we possibly could, what traits did we have in common? And so we listed a set of behaviors around those aspects, and we call them our things. And we recognize that we try and recognize when we catch ourselves doing those. So of course, what you celebrate is replicated. So the company will eventually become a byproduct of what you celebrate a lot, and we celebrate those behaviors.
Yeah, I think there's so much here, but we're not here necessarily to talk about Missing Link in your branding. I kind of want to move into the the topic at hand, which is, this idea of relevance. And you've got your new book, Relentless Relevance, and you've got, keynotes around that, and you founded this business, Too Many Robots. We talked in our pre-call around, relevance in this age that we're at, where so many people are firstly getting pressure and are being sold this idea of personal brand and building yourself into a brand as an asset, as an employee, but even as a business leader. Like, each individual needs their own kind of brand. And then you combine that with this explosion of kind of tools that allow people to be much more exponential in production of thoughts, of visuals, of videos, of things. So now there's all this AI kind of around, allowing people who would have written on LinkedIn once every 2 years to be posting 16 times a day with a fair amount of ease. Like, how do you think about relevance in this time as human beings are kind of using and embracing these tools and building it into this idea of Ross Drake's the brand, or Rich Mulholland the brand?
Okay, so let's first agree on a definition of relevance. I think that's a worthwhile element. For me, it's the state of being appropriate to the matter at hand. So how appropriate am I to the things that the world gives a shit about right now? So you could be the world's best at something, but if nobody needs it, that thing anymore, then you're irrelevant, no matter how good you are. So how appropriate are you to the matter at hand? Now, I think, humans need to evolve, and businesses need to evolve to make sure that we are appropriate to those things. And I think if we don't evolve, we will become irrelevant. I think that to argue that the easy way to solve for AI is just to use it, those who use AI will put out, the people who don't out of business, is nonsensical. So I think we have to, that whole thing, you won't be put out of business by an AI, but by a person using AI. That's like saying the same thing about computers, 30 years ago. We all use computers now, though, so everyone will use these tools. So I think what we need to do is we need to work out, how do we stand apart in a world of AI? Now, this is funny. Missing Link, when one of our cheeky taglines in all of those years way back when was, any asshole could put together a presentation. We're in business because so many do. And this is kind of true with, any idiot can write an AI piece, an article on LinkedIn using AI. We're in business because so many do. That's the kind of point of view that I have at the moment. Is in a world in which everybody can do something, what will happen is everybody will be able to do that thing at a certain level. The people who figure out how to do it at a different level will win. Because all that's happened is the tide has risen, right? And so all of us are now sitting there. So nobody was writing on LinkedIn. Now everyone's writing on LinkedIn. The algorithms are going to get very, very good at separating who's writing something interesting or not. Now, that doesn't mean the algorithm is going to correct for which humans are writing versus which AIs are writing. It's just going to say which is driving more engagement. And so the humans who use AI in a way that basically supersedes other AI to drive more engagement will win, or the humans who are able to write content of their own or create content of their own that will supersede that of AI will win. I'm indifferent. I believe that we should be using these tools fundamentally. Ideally, I don't think we should be using them as the end state to write the content, but I think we should be using them to make ourselves write better material in the first place. But I absolutely do believe that all that's happened is the bar has shifted again, and some people will still stand out.
And I mean, it is, I think we've been through so many iterations of these kind of technological explosions. There was the sort of video online was a thing. Then there was social media and social presence, and it was, in the beginning, it was the first people using it, which was a huge boon. And now, if you don't have social media as a company, you almost have failed. And I think I agree with you that it's the same thing as AI, and using AI. It's going, like you say, it is just going to get built into the pieces. I mean, every product you open nowadays there's people it just pops up and it's like, hey, we have this new AI tool, and for some reason everyone's decided that a little magical amorphous star is the sign of an AI. So every product you open has this thing popping up, and you're like, I didn't realize I even needed AI in here, but like here we go.
It's often the most arbitrary thing that you're like, I didn't even need non-AI to do this, and now you've got AI doing data.
Yes.
It's like people are leaning into novelty, not utility. I must say, what email client do you use? Do you use Superhuman at all?
No, we use Gmail.
So I use Superhuman as a Gmail front end, and at the beginning, both I use Spark on my phone and Superhuman, so I actually pay for two. But at the beginning, it was doing this. We'll help you rewrite your email, and I'm like, I don't need you to rewrite my mail. 90% of the time you do it, I'm going to have to go back and fix it. I'm sure there are use cases for that. Or do you want to write this in a more fun, quirky way? No, just I wrote it as it is. So, but now they're using AI for cool things. So, and I didn't realize this until I was confused last week when an email popped up into my inbox. And it basically was a mail that I'd mailed a client a few weeks ago. It recognized that the client hadn't responded. It typed an auto response. It recommended that I should write as a follow-up based on the period of time, and was sitting in my inbox ready to go. And I was like, oh, I forgot to follow up with this client altogether. Now an AI has basically said, hey, listen, this is a reasonable amount of time. You should have reached out to that person. Here's what you should possibly say to them. And now I just kind of click it, write my own reply. But actually, their timing and utility value of you should probably get back to this person, they ignored you, and it's worth following up on. That's a functional use. So early on, everybody goes with the novelty use because they have to have something, and then through that later they find the utility use.
So how do you think personal brand or people are going to kind of show up in this space? Do you think it's going to follow that thing? I mean, one of my favorite interviews was with Trent Reznor, where someone was like, this sort of advent of digital music production. They were like, what does this mean that everyone can now produce music? He was like, yes, but not everyone's going to produce good music. So it's that same thing. How do you see personal brand or personality kind of showing up in this environment that we find ourselves in?
So I guess like Trent Reznor, similar to the point about, any idiot can put together a presentation. I believe that we can all present ourselves in a certain way, but we have to be able to present ourselves in an environment like this. So if the content that I put out in the world, the books that I write or the videos I create feel fundamentally different to the conversations I have, the conversations I have will win. That's what will be the lasting impression and opinion about me. And so we can't really fake this as much as we'd like to. Now, I do believe that we're hop, skip, and jumping away from the fact where I actually get an AI avatar to show up and you don't know if you're really speaking this way. Are you speaking to me? Or are you speaking to my bot? How do we know that? Is one of my team just doing this? We're using video filters and stuff. And I recognize we're not far away from there. This is why I guess I'm so gung-ho about real life stages. I think for the first time in the world, stages showing up, having a personal brand where you can, let me go back on that. Remember, if a brand is just a person's opinion about you, a personal brand is just other people's opinions about a human. And what you want to do is to have more people have an opinion about you. I think the kind of goal that you're going for is how many times what is your mentions per ratio? So if somebody says my name once outside of my family and friends, says my name once a month, I've got a mentions per month ratio. If somebody mentions my name in passing once a week, then it's mentions per week. If you took somebody like Donald Trump, then Donald Trump would be mentions per second. That's a very strong brand. Whether you like him or hate him, that's a very powerful engine that he has turning. Gary Vaynerchuk might be, I don't know, mentions per minute. I don't know. I guess maybe somebody every minute in the world will mention them. And I guess that's the goal, right? Is to increase the surface area of your mentions, or the frequency of your mentions. How often can you do that? So I think one way of doing that is creating lots of content. And I think AI tools can help you do that in a faster, better way. And actually, the difference with Trent Reznor's statement is that now AI is very good at creating good content. Like sometimes I'll write something and I'll put it in AI and it gives me back what it would fix. And I'm like, well, fuck, that sucks. It's definitely better. Like it's definitely improved. It's not a case of, oh, well, if it's human, it's necessarily better. I mean, they're drawing from a better basis, but it's about having the interesting ideas to give into it in the first place. And I think that's what the real challenge will be. Sure, we can eventually get to the point where it can just auto-generate, auto-rich, auto-be me. But for now, it's about having ideas and views on the world that you can give to these tools that will set your thinking apart from the other humans. And as of now, I don't think that we're at the point yet where it can do that. I think you can spot the sameness of everything, even without the end dashes.
I mean, the thing, I don't like the term personal brand. I don't believe everything should be a personal brand. I don't think we need more brands. I think it's an interesting thing. It's almost disingenuous to package yourself as a brand and then try and sell yourself to people, because that's why we make brands. We make brands to influence a decision, more often than not a sale. Saying that, what you said, I think people should hold point of views. And that is, the interesting thing, that I have a point of view about this topic. And I don't believe people should have a personal brand. I'm not even saying I'm right. That's just what I believe. Because when people start branding themselves heavily and pushing it out in the world, I get a little bit of like, oh, that feels weird. Like it feels like it's not the person that I sort of know. And there's different people on different continuums. Some people push really hard and other people's a lot more subtle. Like a Seth Godin has a really strong brand, but it's an exceedingly subtle one, whereas like I don't know, Gary Vaynerchuk is a lot more, like a lot more overt about it. But I also think that's very much their personalities and their point of views on the world. Like, one is do interesting things and people find you, and the other one is like be loud and everywhere and everyone will listen to you. And those are two very clear, distinct things. I guess the tools at the moment and the way people are thinking about it are creating a thing in the middle where, like you say, it's just a whole bunch of people making stuff that is almost useless and not interesting, and no one wants to read it. So it's almost just like a pile of noise that's being sort of generated, which I guess, coming back to where you started, gives people the opportunity to sort of step up a little bit and elevate into a place above that noise, but it is creating a ton of noise at the moment.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, not a bad thing, right? If you listen to the music of, even good music back in the 50s, it was great for then. But as we have more and more music, you kind of have to work a little bit harder to make really, really magnificent music. I was watching a breakdown yesterday of Chop Suey, System of a Down, and what went into that and creating that, and the level of complexity and thought just blew my mind. I had no idea, and I think that's what we're kind of getting to now. If you look at some of the great content creators out there, they're doing phenomenal work, and really, really, it's not just here's my opinion, like the shit that I do. It's a case of here's a phenomenal production. I think that we can separate this though from we need to draw a line by the fact that everybody who creates content is not a content creator. So I don't consider myself a content creator at all. I consider myself a business person and speaker, an entrepreneur maybe and speaker. I happen to create content because I think that's part of the ticket to the game. If I was a content creator, I'd be way more intentional and way more focused on what the algorithm wants. As a entrepreneur and a thinker and somebody who aspires to lead thought, the idea is that I want to be beholden to my own thoughts and opinions. And so I try my best to, or I believe that, and let's go back to this. As a business owner, I do believe if you own a certain size company, you can do your business a lot of value by being well known. But there's a tension. there's a tension, right? So if Ross Drakes becomes one of the world's leaders thinkers in his field and then tries to sell Nicework, then it's really, really difficult to uncouple these two, because you become synonymous with it. So that becomes very, very tricky. It's like, oh, but we want Ross to stay. What we actually want is Ross Drakes, the brand that is, or the company that is, manifested, presented as. Equally, though, is if you do it the other way, I see entrepreneurs go the other way and they build this amazing business. Then when they sell it, they don't know what their identity is. They don't know who they are. So there's this kind of weird tension that exists at the moment, an almost term like a business personal branding term, that is this coexisting relationship and difference between the brand of the charismatic leader, thought leader, and the brand of the business itself. And we should kind of know where the one starts and the one ends, I would guess. But I don't necessarily think that, when you see people write that thing, the views I express here are mine alone and do not represent the company. Fuck off. You don't get to say that. It's not even enforceable by law. Like if the CEO of Google goes out and says, or Sam Altman, somebody mentioned, if Sam Altman goes out and says something and you hate it, you can't say, listen, that's not OpenAI. It is. It's currently OpenAI. Anyway.
I think it also comes back to how we think about things, So if I think Sam Altman's the company, then when everything he says influences that, and you see people who, Apple's an interesting one, right? Because Apple is an exceptionally strong brand. It's the one that most branding schools will talk about, and people will show you their ads and their copy and their packaging and their devices, and all the fanboys lord over it like it's the greatest thing ever. And it is a phenomenal piece of kind of, brand engineering. But then there's the Steve Jobs, which is also in itself, like his personality and his point of view was so strong that people also recognize Steve Jobs. Even though decades after he's gone, people are still referencing what he says. But Apple now has this leader in Tim Cook, who is an exceptional businessman. If you look at Apple, the business under Steve Jobs, it was a tenth as successful as it is under Tim Cook. Like Tim Cook has made that thing into an like a global, like the biggest company on it. Like that's Tim Cook's kind of legacy. But if you were to measure Tim versus Steve, like I think Steve has a much bigger perceptive, the mentions per minute is probably outstripped than Tim Cook. But if you were to measure in company worth, Tim's actually done a better job than Steve did.
Yeah, I would argue, generally speaking, I would imagine that the reputation of the founder is more important in newer businesses. In established businesses, the reputation of the business is stronger. And I was walking past the Tesla the other day when I was in Manchester, and on the back of it, it had a sticker, and it said, "I bought this before I knew that Elon had lost his mind." And it was basically that, people keying Teslas when they walk past them and damaging them in the last few months because they hate Elon Musk is a direct showcase on how the one can influence the other. Like, you can't separate the two. Like if you were a deeply liberal person in the United States, it's inconceivable now that you can also own a Tesla.
And it's interesting because that was their core demographic at the beginning of the...
Right. It's a very tricky, it's a very weird thing, but we can't step away from it. So because opinions matter, and the opinion of the person on the top will absolutely reflect on the opinion. If you think, if I buy this thing, I'm going to give somebody... Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard that thing that says, we're both going to stop smoking. Whoever smokes starts again, or whoever misses, eats a cheat meal first, they have to make a donation to the party of the opposition, of the political party they believe in. That's been a really, really big motivator. Like, I wouldn't mind making a charitable donation. That makes me feel good. But if you ask me to donate to the charity of, I don't know, I eat a vegan diet. If I had to donate money to some kind of, preservation of carnivore society, then that would make me think differently. And that's technically what people are doing if they buy a Tesla and they disagree with Elon Musk. So in that instance, even though the term personal branding is like a little bit like that, it certainly holds weight and has power. And I believe going forward, in a world where everything can be faked, I do believe there is a lot of value in basically human to human relationships will matter more than they have in the past. In a world where everything can be faked, how people show up in reality is going to be the most important thing. And how humans show up as opposed to businesses show up will be important. So I would suggest that the role of the human behind the business is slightly more important this now than it was in generations gone.
I think there's also a very interesting dynamic between them, right? So your business has to be a certain way. I mean, you built Missing Link to be a lot more kind of, in your face, but not all businesses, like you say, can operate like that. But if you think about it almost as a chessboard, and the business is one brand doing one job out there, the leader or leaders of the business can also be in other places doing other things and holding not different, but either more extreme or more outrageous or more whatever kind of opinions about things. I mean, Richard Branson does this exceedingly well for his businesses. Like, he's got these wild ideas and he does these wild marketing stunts, but then his businesses are fairly tame in terms of their brand and how they show up. They're not like completely insane, but he uses his insanity to get the attention, and then he transfers the attention into dollars into the businesses. I mean, Virgin Cola was this wild thing, but as a product it was fairly average, and they used the same distribution chains, and they were also in a Tesco, and they were also, it was like almost the same product, but he used himself as a way of, driving a tank down the street in London was how he got people to sort of notice that there was this cola. So that relationship is interesting, and I like this idea that they, now it's more important because people want to sort of see a little bit more of that humanness in this kind of sea of crazy technology that's dominating everything. So I can buy into that.
So I've only ever queued for one thing, like properly in my life, where I waited outside the store for
coffee in Hawaii. Coffee in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah,
a pour over in Hawaii.
No, I think that was the worst pour over ever. They were terrible. But anyway, was Richard Branson's book. When his book Losing My Virginity came out, I was waiting outside the door at Exclusive Books in Cresta for it to come. I think he's probably I feel like if there was a book on personal branding, he would be well to be the guy on the cover. I feel like he made an organization, like he made it cool, and he figured out a way to do it in a great way. It's not easy to replicate. It's not a manual, but it's an understanding of how a human can come and their antics can come to represent something. So even though Virgin Active doesn't feel like Virgin Atlantic, which feels a little bit more like it has his fingertips on it, it certainly has that same feeling of love that you have for it. Your default enjoyment of the Virgin brand is there. Virgin is there, I should have said. All right, boys and girls, it appears like we've lost Ross Drakes. So here it is. Welcome to a few more questions with Rich from Mulholland. Richard, I want to ask you, I've always wanted to ask you, what is it about that stupid accent of yours? Well, I'm glad you asked me. Right, so I was born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1974. And when I was 9 years old, I moved to South Africa. And when I was in South Africa, I lived there for a number of years. And then it was like lekker and so nice. And then I recently moved across to the Isle of Man. Now, I will not try to do any kind of Manx accent at all, but that's basically what the problem is. Now, let me tell you, when we're talking about relevance, now that it's my show, the wonderful thing about being having a weird accent is, as a professional speaker, you're always respected more in countries where you don't sound like the locals. Now, I've never gone to a country where I sound like the locals, so it's a bit of a win. Now, I'm going to jump into the chat and see if we have any questions. Right, so now, guys, in the chat, the few of you are, I am confused. You're now running the show, so I'm going to answer any questions from the audience. This has now become an audience panel show. can see how fast I'm speaking before Ross comes back, and I'm unable to do that. So fire away, fastest finger first, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do this. Challenge any notion, challenge any idea. Oh, this is fine. I mean, we should play Strip Ross Drake's room where you ask questions and, I suppose I'd be the only one taking off clothes. This is terrible. Okay, let me see what other opinions I want to have while I'm here. Okay, so I do think that let's talk about this notion of personal branding in a world of AI and why I think that there is an important element. I believe that we have an authenticity problem that the world is facing at the moment, that people are not able to trust the level of anything that they see as if it came from the person or not. Did that person write that? Did they say that? Is this really them? Has somebody written a script for them? I believe that human to human connection is where we make our true opinions. Geez, okay, thank goodness you come back, Ross. I was talking shit for ages here, just trying to fill time to see how well I could do. I was panicking, but anyway,
you did it.
Back.
I came in at one point. At one point, I was a guest watching you, take over the show.
I was going to try and answer questions, but it wasn't really working. Thank you.
This is the one, this is where brand fails. I mean, Riverside FM sold me on this thing, and I've done 3 streams on it now, and they've failed all 3 times. So now I'm going to be looking for a different streaming platform because their brand promise hasn't delivered on what it said it would do.
So speaking of brand promise, Diane asked a question. Understanding hyper-personalization, isn't personal brand super important?
So I think personalization is important, but it really does need to come back to what are you saying? What do you actually stand for? What do you actually, because, I think a lot of people use personalization as a way of reaching out. Hello, insert name here. I see we have insert personal comment, in common, and we would like insert thing you're trying to sell here, which I think people see through exceedingly quickly. I think if you can personalize AI tools to mimic your thought, to mimic your way of being and way of talking, it is a exceptional extender of what you're doing. So if you can teach it the language that you like and the way you talk and the way you construct sentences, then it is a very, very, very powerful thing. And I do still think there is an element of being able to really target people using the research and kind of getting insights and being able to sort of customize things to people. But I personally hope that it doesn't reach the level that it's gone with kind of ads, that we don't have these like hyper-personalized robots just sort of harassing us in every corner of the internet, because that's a deeply sad world to live in.
Yeah, one of the tools we built in Too Many Robots was an outgoing phone bot. Now, you had to opt into it, so we wouldn't phone you. Is if you wanted to chat to Tamara Wentforth, our CEO, you could phone, and she would phone you back and have a chat to you. And based on certain criteria in the search, she could do it in the background. She could actually have a conversation with you in such a way that was a bit more personal than it would necessarily feel as if you were having a call with a complete stranger. I believe that has a massive amount of utility value. Even in human-to-human connection. Have you, Ross, you were with me in EO when we brought in the Crystal Nose tool. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And Crystal Nose will allow you, if you're engaging with somebody on LinkedIn, if you use that tool, if it's turned on, it will kind of let you know how that person likes to be engaged with. So you can click on their profile, what kind of language they would like, what they don't like, and it's built up this big profile based on all the content that's being put out by them in the world. And I think that does help. The only problem with it is I'm not going to change the way I speak. People have said this to me from day one, because you can't keep up an act for long. So yes. I call every CEO in the world dude, and the ones who don't like it are the ones who will never hire us. The vast majority of the ones that we deal with are pretty fine with it, and they would think it would be weird if I called them anything else. And in fact, the fact that I do them or whatever is the idea is that we are closer. We are more have a more personal connection, even though I've not personalized my approach for them. I am speaking to them as a person as opposed to a title. I always say one of the worst bits of advice that speaker coaches give is know your audience. How? You can't know people en masse. And the other problem with this hyper personalization is what I put out in the world. My public self, is the dinner party version of my private self. So how I show up when I'm at a dinner party and I've got people, and I'm trying to tell them a story and I'm showing this and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of what I put out in the world, because nobody wants the boring, shitting, farting version of myself that I am normally, that I am with my family. So if somebody, though, if a brand was to use everything I put out there to hyper personalize the content towards me in the way that I communicate in small bites, in 3-minute increments to the world, then I would get very, very frustrated, because that's not who I am. That's a part of who I am. And it's the performative part that I have to be when I'm on stage or doing work, because, that's what we have to do. That's what people pay you for. But when you're engaging with most things in your life, you're engaging as the non-dinner party version of yourself. You're engaging with the, faffing around the kitchen, making yourself a sandwich self. And that's a very different person. I'm not saying that humans are disingenuous. I'm saying that we need to understand that we're a range, and most of our decisions are not made in the public range. They're made in the private range.
Yes. I think that's spot on. I think there is going to be a huge space for hyper personalized products based on your behaviors and things like that. So it's not necessarily in the branding world, but the actual things that they're building for you, the individual. I think people are going to go nuts for that stuff. I think it's going to be a huge explosion of opportunities.
Amazing. And we'll love it. But like, if you see, how many times have you bought on your Facebook, you've seen a customized t-shirt that's so clearly an ad for a customized t-shirt, dads of 8-year-olds, blah 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 blah. And so they just make content up in real time, and maybe occasionally people will buy it, but
I think the challenge with all this stuff is algorithms are often wrong, and I think they will continue to be wrong for the reason that you said, Rich, is that not everything I say and think and believe shows up in the digital world, and that's the only information that they can use to sort of track me as an individual. And you can say that because if you ever play a game, go to your friend's phone, open their Instagram, and hit the search function, and you'll see the content that the algorithm believes that person wants. That's how the algorithm understands that human being at that time. And it is wild. It is wild to see what they think about you. And then you can then ask the person, does this actually represent what you want? And if they some of them are going to lie to you and others are not. But it's interesting to see how they perceive you. What are you getting, Rich?
Basically,
naked ladies.
No, it's like tattoos, kind of weird, difficult things, and it looks like funny memes, like people falling down and shit. That's what it seems to be, because 90% of my feed is curated by my wife sending me funny shit to watch.
So she is skewing what Facebook believes about you. And I guess to sort of close up to what Diane asked is now they are curating and customizing and personalizing based on one very narrow data point that they have on you. And is that customization going to be right, is the question.
So we are curating, I guess where maybe things like Facebook have an edge is it knows what groups I've joined. It knows that I'm in board game groups and fidgets groups, right? So it is able to do a somewhat better idea of that. But still, I made a big thing years ago, and I talk about it in, I think, 2 of the books, but definitely in Relentless Relevance, is that I ride motorcycles, but I'm not a biker. I play lots of board games. I was at a board game fair in Birmingham last weekend, but I'm not a board gamer. I eat a plant-based diet, but I'm not a vegan. I don't like any of those blanket terms, because if I say to you, oh, he's a biker, you have a point of view. No, I just like riding motorcycles. He is a reader. Well, no, I love reading. It's like one of my favorite things in the world to do. But if you drew an archetype of a reader, you have a view. A reader and a biker that is a board gamer, that is a vegan, that does jujitsu, like these are problematic. And so what everything tries to do is tries to take one slice of who you are and personalize that. Now, if you want to sell me, instructional videos for jujitsu, and you know that I'm a blue belt, one stripe, then, you can send certain videos. That level of personalization is valuable, but it doesn't do a good job of personalizing for Richard as a whole, because I am not any one of these things. I am some total of those, plus everything else: father, uncle, brother, son, husband, all of those other things that I am as well.
I mean, do you remember when Paul Jason,
a brand? Yeah.
You remember when Paul Jason remodeled his spa? They went through this deep thing of interviewing all their customers around what they wanted.
Yeah, see Paul
So
Jason.
when they remodeled their spa, they built this huge salad bar and sushi thing and all of this stuff. And do you know what people bought after the remodel? Pies. They bought pies, because no one wants to stand in the shop and say, you know what I want to do? You know what I want to buy is I want to buy pies. Like, they want to say, oh, I buy salad and low calorie dressing, and our digital personas are not too dissimilar. We are all presenting what we believe is our best version of self, and we're filtering it through our lens of bias and our lens of how our identity and what opportunities we're seeking online. And this is what these models are sort of perceiving of us. They're not seeing all of the pie eating behind it.
We are boring people. We're all boring. And in fact, if you're not boring, you're losing at life. Right? Life is being comfortable, being boring. And when you're able to be yourself as long as you can, the more you're able to be absolutely yourself, the better you are. The more you're able to show up as a boring version of yourself, the better your life will be. But we don't. We show up as this exciting version of ourselves. What you want to do is close the gap between the two as much as possible. The one lucky thing I am is deeply, deeply curious. Like, if I had one thing, is like I'm just genuinely very, very inquisitive. And I challenge notions. People think I'm contrarian. I'm not contrarian. It's just I don't like my opinions being fed to me. So if somebody says something is X, I want to research and I want to see how much does that hold up. The reason I come across as contrarian, and I guess that's been my personal brand, is that I don't bother sharing shared views on things. So if I agree with you about something fundamentally, and everybody in the world agrees with X, then why, I'm not going to make content on it and a video on it, because nobody needs to read another article on find your why. You got to find your why, and are you living to your true why? First off, like, I think it's a terrible idea. I think you don't have to find your why. It's the biggest load of fucking grift shit I've ever heard in my entire life. More power to Simon Sinek for coming up with it. Absolutely amazing, but ridiculous. But I only talk about things I disagree with. This idea of personal purpose, I disagree. I think it's a horrifically bad idea that's driving people to suicide. I think it's a terrible, terrible idea that you believe that you have personal purpose. And so then I'll talk about that, because it's a counter narrative. It's something I have a differing opinion about a topic that's relevant. So I am appropriate or inappropriate to the matter at hand, and neither of those work. And so it's my curiosity, and that's the stuff that I think about at home when I'm boring me, and I try to bring that into the world when I'm, less shit me.
I mean, if you were to see what I do at home right now, I'm an amateur wrestler. That's what I do. I go into my house and there's a tiny boy and we wrestle and we run around and we kick each other. And that's what we spend most of our time doing. Lauren says she goes from one what the fuck to the next.
I'm assuming the worst. I'm assuming it's not like, what the fuck? I'm sure it's like, what the fuck? I apologize in advance. Well, I apologize in reverse.
I think I think we've reached the point where we can kind of start getting some questions from people. I mean, Lauren did also mention earlier about how much he likes ChatGPT but hates OpenAI and Sam Altman. I mean, I think this is an interesting discussion because they're these big tools that are fighting for our attention. And by fighting for our attention, they're not only fighting for our attention, they're fighting for the input because, they're fighting for the food to make their models better and better and better. So the more people that use these things are ultimately going to make it a better, more dominant model. And you look at, there was the whole DeepSeek thing. DeepSeek came out and OpenAI stock crashed and it completely fell apart and it's the most useless thing. But the OpenAI brand and the ChatGPT brand is much more powerful than every other tool in the market. And therefore they win more market share because they have more perception because they've built a stronger brand. And part of that is also just because they were the first ones to put an interesting interface on top of the tool.
Brand will rarely trump convenience if you can do it in private. So the problem that Elon Musk has is that if I buy a Tesla and I drive down the road and people are like, oh, we shouldn't support that guy, he's a conservative, how dare he? There is a public-facing element to it, right? So it's conspicuous consumption. So if you do conspicuous consumption, if you wear, Balenciaga hoodie or something, and you do conspicuous consumption, then you are beholden to the brand of the other people. But what you do in private, we get off scot-free with. Now, in one obvious case, I can dislike Sam Altman, but if his tool's really, really good, and by the way, I don't dislike Sam Altman personally. I did a startup school when he ran Y Combinator. I really enjoyed it. Thought he was a very smart person. And I just don't think people are trained for this level of growth. Like, I can't behave being Sam Altman in the world of AI. But even if I did, and I was like, oh no, I'd far rather use Perplexity. Perplexity is much better, blah, 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 but still use ChatGPT because nobody could see. It's kind of how people are when every time people get upset with Woolies. They're always boycotting Woolies. Woolies is always like, that's it. I'm never shopping from Woolies again. They stole Frankie's Cola. They did this. They did the next thing. That Frankie's Cola thing, if social media is to believe, Woolies would have closed its doors a month later. That was it. That was the end. It was done. It was caught. Oh my God, Woolies white labels food that looks like other popular stuff that people like. What? You didn't get that from the white labeling of everything on their stores. Like, it's crazy. But actually, if my brand opinion, because your brand is your opinion on the public facing element versus your actual brand opinion, which is I really like how their Malva pudding is. I mean, Willie's Malva pudding is the one Malva pudding. Nobody argues that their mom's Malva pudding is better. Like, we all accept that Willie's Malva pudding is the top of the scale and everything else is below it. So if I want Malva pudding, well, fuck, I don't like their politics, but I really want that Malva pudding, then you'll go and you'll get it.
And you can pull your hoodie, your Balenciaga hoodie over your head, and you can shuffle in there in your.
Hide up there, you go in there like, while using OpenAI's ChatGPT to do shit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that is the problem. Is if you can do it, if we can separate our opinions privately, then we can get away with holding opposing views. It might make ourselves feel a bit dirty, though.
Well, I guess it is that there is this cycle of the internet is essentially, especially the social internet, is a cycle of social pressure. And there's a topic of the day, and depending on which side you sit on, social media would have you believe that we have to kind of lager up into these two separate camps and sort of throw insults at each other, and then we roll onto the next sort of opinion. I mean, remember Je suis Charlie, and everyone was changing their kind of profile images, and it was this whole kind of outrage. But the net result of that was very little. Like, it didn't actually change anything. But I remember I didn't change my profile picture, and a few people asked me, they were like, don't you believe in this thing?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I do believe in it, but I don't think changing my Facebook picture is going to make any significant difference to the actual reality of what's happening in the world. And this is this duality that we live in, that you're talking about.
Probably one of the more unpopular net profit talks I did. And I could see that people were deeply upset about it because, I think so many of them did it. But I did a talk called Avatar Activism. And I basically said that anybody who does that, you're just sheep. You're doing nothing. You're changing nothing. Activists actually activate. changing your thing as a show of support, it means nothing. I walked past a Wagamama's the other day in Manchester, and the Wagamama's, I think, is the greatest for what it's worth. In this opinion, changed nothing. The greatest chain of food in the planet is Wagamama for me. Like, it's my favorite, I should say. And you've got the Wagamama's logo this big, and if you imagine the entire screen, that is the pride flag, or the one with the trans version and the more inclusive one. And I remember
the one that looks like the South African flag with more colors.
Yeah, the South African plan is prettier, right? Yeah. And so like it's all the pretty colors. And I got angry when I walked past, and I was like, this is fucking stupid. And Jazz was like, why are you getting so triggered? And it's not that I don't, it's that this ridiculous, look at me, look what I'm doing. It's not true. It's just so inauthentic. Like I lose whether or not I'm not offering an opinion on what I think about the LGBT community. Let's assume the best of me and assume that I do support, I do want people to live their best lives. Okay. My opinion of the Wagamama's brand for Pride Month, putting up a big fucking logo, has diminished, because I feel like your disingenuous twats are flying the flag for 1 month just because it's perceived to be a nice thing to do. So if anything, that's a negative brand message for me. Does that make any sense?
It does. It's, I think, coming back to the what do you really believe, and can your actions back up that thing that you are stating, or are you doing it because it's, Father's Day is here, so now everyone is putting up their Father's Day stuff, and then they roll immediately into, I don't know what the next sort of commercial holiday is, but it's the stuff of, it's Women's Month, so let's take all the women in the company and put a profile of them on LinkedIn, and change nothing. Change no behavior. Yeah.
Right. That to me says that you have no integrity, that you are just you are just a fluid that will, whatever the big issue of the month is, like all of those brands of the George Floyd thing, like EO, remember that EO, were you part of that group debate around what should we state? Listen, if you don't know what to state 2 weeks after it happened, you just say nothing. Just you have to say something. Well, say nothing, because you're not going to say anything. You're just going to say what everybody else is saying late, right? So just don't do that. Don't, make you don't have to make the BLM logo your logo for the month as a protest. So these flip-floppy elements, they show a complete lack of courage for me. I would far more respect them, Wagamama's, if they made that their logo permanently. Like that, we want to permanently stand for this. But if you're doing it for 1 month every year, I have no respect. And I think this brings me back to, maybe because I know we're running out of time, to close off where we started on the personal branding thing, is that it is about being brave enough. I think if you want to stand out in the world today, that's a surefire way not to. If everybody does this and you do that, you're not going to stand out. If you are doing something just because you'd be scared that if you don't do it, you look like you're left out, then that's a problem. You've got to be brave enough to be willing to be left out. And you've got to be smart enough to be able to stand out. It's that book Zag by, I think it was Marty Neumeier. But if the whole world is zigging, be willing to zag. Now, that's not to say that, if everybody is doing something for Pride Month, you need to be counter-narrative. It means you don't necessarily need to do that for that month, and you should be sure enough about who you are and what you say generally to represent yourself consistently to some degree. It can be inconsistent ideas presented consistently, which I think is a good thing.
It is. I mean, I guess it's, we live in this time that automation, AI, all of these tools is going to make the volume of ideas that have come from a human or not kind of increase, and this sort of pressure will also increase. And I guess, the way I think about it is, if you want to be noticed, if you want to be, if you're trying to attain that attention, what's it, mentions per minute, you need to embrace yourself a bit more and be a little bit more bold with yourself, because that is literally the only thing that you can hold on to, that people will be able to discern a difference between you and somebody else, and it is that thing, like you're saying, like if I believe this and everybody else is standing over there, I'm going to stand over here because this is ultimately what I believe, or my opinion on something, and I can show up with that proudly as opposed to just following along.
Yeah. And I think that's what we should be, that's where we should get to. That's what we should be trying to land on. And one other thought is an extrapolation would be, you mentioned, what people want in that last sentence. I think we might get to a point pretty soon where what people want will matter less than what the algorithms want. And what I mean by that is that if the world social opinion is made by influencers that are AI generated and things like that, eventually what people actually want is going to be not that important. It is how does one AI communicate with other AIs to get to allow their AIs to create content around the original AI in such a way that eventually the humans are just going to be fed the thing that they want. So all we are is the consumption machines, right? So we're just the ones who in the end push the buy button. And at some point, we're going to get to the point where that's not even going to matter either. You'll be able to choose, and we will be left with this weird illusion of choice, but actually everything's happening in the background. And at that point, human to human authenticity won't matter as much as we think it will in any time other than this kind of connection, or actually
in the real world,
in person, in the room. Yeah.
So I think that's a great thought to live on, that we can invest more in the real world, and we must play in the digital world because we have to. And if we're going to take part in the internet apocalypse, let's do it. But that person to person in the flesh, or even using digital tools, is a much more powerful connection to make.
Yeah, the number one goal for life must be, everything should stem from being more interesting when you're in the room with the other humans. And if you can be interested and interesting in equal measure, then you're going to be in good shape. People always say you don't have to be interesting, just be interested. That's fine, but you're not going to lead any thought that way. People will like you enough in the short space, but you need to be both if you want to be known online as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Rich. That's it for this week. We'll be back with more business and branding in the next episode. If you can subscribe to get every episode. Thank you to Rich for showing up today, and thank you for all the people who gave us the questions and the comments. If you think somebody needs to hear this, please share it or give us a review. 10 More Questions is brought to you by Nicework. We're dedicated to helping people and businesses make a dent in the world through brands that people actually care about. Thank you very much. And until next one, bye-bye.
Bye, Yella.
I can pretend like I'm professional. Bye.
I do like